Brian Foster, and welcome to our live stream on Tuesday on June 15th. I want to congratulate everybody for being here. And again, I'm talking about Spiritism. Before I begin, please subscribe, hit the bell to be notified of when I do live stream. Sometimes time zones change, and I kind of keep on my own time zone, so sometimes it could be off by an hour. So please hit the bell if you want to be notified. And also, I have a Brian's Spiritist newsletter on Substack. I'm sorry. Please sign up for that. You can get to my blog site, and you'll see a link. nwspiritism.com. You'll see a link to Subscribestack. So, I'd like to start on part 2 of chapter 21. I think it should be 3 parts. It's a long chapter. It's the fires of hell. Now, Franchezzo, as I said before, was a very intelligent spirit. He kind of let a lot of his kind of more primitive inclinations let go in the society of the time. He ended up in the lower zone, and he went further down. And then he, with the help of his love of his life, he started going further up. And then he came into a spirit colony, and now he's part of a team that is trying to help. He went back down to into what he calls hell, what we call spiritists call the dark abyss, where there's no eternal damnation. You're only there until you change your attitude and your character. But now he's down there to try and help other souls who were like him rise above. So let me go to chapter. This is here. I know everybody likes to read along. And this is, I finished right at this paragraph where it says, now the earthly body died, but the immortal soul lived. So he was watching this judge who was being tortured. He was by this guy he wronged. What he did, this was in some colony in South America. What the judge did is he put a merchant into jail, kept him there, let him starve, let him die there because he wanted his wife. Then his wife and his child died. And then, of course, the judge couldn't let him out because he would tell everybody what he did, and he just let him die there. So this guy died. His wife went to heaven because she forgave. Now, this guy who is watching the judge suffering could not forgive. And of course, and as Franchezzo said, he thought he was condemned to hell forever, because that's what the Catholic Church said is you know, if you're not given your last rites and you're excommunicated, because all this stuff was done because the judge unfairly said he was a heretic and all that. So he thought, well, he's in hell, he might as well be that way. And so, but of course that's not true, right? But this is what happens when you really want revenge. If you want revenge so much, all you do is you short circuit, you retard your progress. You're just slowing yourself down. Karma is fully taken care of by the spirit world. Anyone does you wrong, does other people wrong, that will be taken care of. Believe me, there's smarter people than we, much smarter, is in charge of trying to plan out people's lives, maybe not this planet, maybe other planets, to have the stimuli ready to make them learn from their past mistakes. Because this is what we are. We are a planet of atonement. The Earth is a planet of atonement where we pay for our past wrongs, and it's an edification. It's not punishment. Pay. It's like learning that we shouldn't do that again. Like you have to teach a child, but come on, don't go hit your friend. You know, don't go take that candy from him just because you want it. So you just have to learn that. You have to get rid of you have to replace your primitive emotions with more advanced emotions. So now think of that we're in this guy is changed to a dungeon wall. And his victim is face to face with him. And now I'll carry on. I'll start reading. There were others whom the judge has wronged and sent to a death of suffering to gratify his anger or to enrich himself at their expense. And all these gathered round him and made his awakening a hell indeed. Yet such was the indomitable strength of will of this man that none of the blows aimed at him could touch him. None of the missiles strike. And thus, through all years that those two deadly enemies faced each other, pouring out their hatred and defiance, while those other spirits, like the chorus of a Greek tragedy, came and went and amused themselves, devising fresh means to torment the chained men whose strong will kept them at bay. So, yes, last week we talked about they were throwing knives at him, but none of the knives ever hit him. They all caught with hair. So it shows you that judge who used his force of will for not good was still able to say, no, that knife's not going to hit me. And and as I said before, people with that much force of will at some day will be a great attribute for the spirit world, because they'll turn and they'll say, no, okay, why am I doing bad to people? That's not how I should be. And then they'll turn and they'll be of service and they'll go to heaven. And away in the bright spheres mourned the poor wife, striving and hoping till the time should come when her influence would be felt even in this awful place, when her love and her unceasing prayers should reach the soul of her husband and soften it, that he might relent in his bitter purpose and turn from revenge. So, this happens a lot. In fact, in other Spiritist writings, or this is not Spiritist writing, but in Spiritist writings, there's stories of this guy walking through heaven, and then a spirit says, may I help you? And he goes, well, is this where I think it is? And I'm just paraphrasing real quick. Yes, it's heaven. He goes, well, I thought you're supposed to meet your friends who had come before you, and I haven't seen any of my friends. And the spirit, who quickly had downloaded the information for this guy, said, well, your friends has tried to see you. They've tried to see you, but you haven't noticed them. You are a very intelligent but severe person. Now, your wife was very loving. She's actually a higher sphere than you are. But you cannot see the friends who've come to see you because they are still invisible to you. You have to learn to accept things. Things are not all black and white. Heaven is not how you think it was. You have to accept how it is. You have to accept that it's not either perfect or horrible. It's all things in between. So learn that. Learn to soften your hard edges. You've done many good things, and that's why you're here. But you need to really learn to soften your edges. And so this guy was visited, but he couldn't even see his visitors. The same thing with the husband who wants revenge on the judge. That his wife has kept trying to reach him, but he's just so focused on getting revenge for this guy for killing him and killing his wife and ruining his life, when actuality, look, whatever it's done to us in this mortal body of ours, we're only here for 60, 80 years, whatever lifespan is, for each person, maybe more, maybe less. This is just temporary. We lose this mortal life, it's no big deal. We're in the spirit world, we are immortal. And this is what the merchant should have thought. If that judge did something to him, why? Not much. Some people say nothing is coincidence. I say a little bit. Very, very small. So why was that done to him? Did he do something in the past life to make that judge be in the right position to put him in jail and torture him and starve him to death? So it's all, don't think you're an innocent person here. In fact, sometimes if you're being taken advantage of, you go, oh, okay, I must have done that to somebody else. Thank you. I've learned my lesson. I won't do that. And it's really good for you because you've gone through one of your trials. So let me carry on. It was her prayers which had drawn me to this dungeon, and it was her soul which spoke to mine, telling me all the sad, cruel story, and pleading with me to carry to her unhappy husband the knowledge that she lived only in thoughts of him, only in the hope that he would be drawn by her love to the upper spheres, to join her in peace and happiness at last. With this vision strong upon me, I drew near the solemn man, who was growing tired of his revenge, and his heart was full of longing for the wife he loved so passionately. I touched him upon the shoulder, and I said, friend, I know why you are here, and all the cruel story of your wrongs, and I am sent from her you love to tell you that in the bright land above she awaits you, wearing that you do not come, and marveling that you can find revenge more sweet than her caresses. She bids me to tell you that you chain yourself here when you might be free. So that's a very direct way. I will see what happens. The spirit started as I spoke. Then turning to me, grasped my arm and gazed long and earnestly to my face, as though to read there whether I spoke truly or falsely. Then he sighed as he drew back, saying, "Who are you, and why do you come here? You are like none of those who belong to this awful place, and your words are words of hope. Yet how can there be hope for the soul in hell?" So again, this is his predilection of learning within the culture of his time, is that he's told that hell is eternal. If you're in hell, you never get out. Well, the spirit world lets people who are in this dark abyss, they let them believe that because that is their punishment, right? But there's not, right? He just has to change his character's attitude, and they'll help him out, just like Franchezzo is trying to do for him. And then Franchezzo said, "There is hope even here, for hope is eternal, and God in his mercy shuts none out from it. Whatever man in his earth-distorted image of the divine teachings may do, I am sent to give hope to you and others who are, like you, in sorrow for the past. And if you will but come with me, I can show you how to reach the better land." I saw that he hesitated, and a bitter struggle went on in his heart, for he knew that it was his presence which kept his enemy a prisoner, that were he to go to the other, would be free to wander through this dark land. And even yet he could hardly let him go. Then I spoke again of his wife, his child. Would he not rather go to them? The strong, passionate man broke down as he thought of those loved ones, and burying his face in his hands, wept bitter tears. I put my arm through him and led him, unresisting, out of the prison and out of the city. Here we found spirit friends were awaiting the poor man, and with them I left him, that they might bear him to a bright land where he would see his wife from time to time, till he worked himself up to the level of her sphere, where they would be united forever in a happiness more perfect than could ever have been their lot on earth. Now, I've heard this quite a few times, where it's usually the woman who's a higher sphere, because she's a nicer, less cruel person. And the man is a good person, but he doesn't have that softness and that love. So although he could be, as other spirits, he could be maybe, less or more, but a lot of times he thinks he's more intelligent than his wife. But as the spirit would tell him, as this one example, a guy said, look, and in fact, it's the same one who didn't see his friends. He says, you can't see your friends because of your hardness. And he also said, your wife is at a higher sphere. Now, I know you think your wife wasn't as intelligent as you, but here in heaven, it's not intelligence. It's the combination of intelligence, love, caring, fraternity, charity. It's wisdom, which is empathy and intelligence together. And so you need both. And so that's why you can't just, you might be a really good person, but you're just very severe intellectually. And you may not make it to heaven because you're just so severe that they're going to let you work it out a little bit, right? Because that's what the lower zone, which is the lower zone, is below heaven till the crust of the earth, and below the crust of the dark abyss where this person is at right now, which is he calls hell. So you can see the chaos in living with people who aren't that nice to live with. It's all for a purpose. There's nothing there just for the sake of raw punishment, for the pleasure of seeing someone punished. It's for their edification. And they would have never have experienced that. Like that judge wouldn't have been chained to the wall by this victim if the judge hadn't done something, and so he can find out what it's like to be the victim, right? It's the opposite of the golden rule. People do unto you as you have done unto others. Now, if he hadn't done that unto others, would he be in that position? Absolutely not. So it's action and reaction. Nothing happens like that without a purpose. So if you want your next life to be better, I can't tell you how many emails and comments I have goes, well, I don't want to believe in reincarnation. I don't want to come back to this life. Well, you have free will. Now, if you're in the lower zone or in the dark abyss, right below, the higher spirits will dictate when you reincarnate, and they'll dictate to you your life plan. But if you are lucid enough and a nice enough person to be a saint to get to heaven, about 30% of people go to heaven from after they physically die here on earth. Then you can be part of your planning for your next life, and you have free will saying, I don't really want to go back, and they'll let you stay as long as you want. Now, what the spirit world will do is they'll show you like, well, if you want to rise in the spirit world, you've got to kind of replace some of these primitive emotions. And the most efficient way to do that is going on earth when you're locked in this physical cocoon, and your senses you've got blinders on your senses, and it's extremely efficient to modify your character and your personality. And then you decide, well, is it worth me going just for a moment in time, because I am immortal, I can be here forever, to earth, kind of go through some hassle, come back and go to those more marvelous places and be able to do more for help for other people. So they'll set that up, and they'll let you decide, do you want to make that decision or not? Okay, let me carry on. I did not return to the city, for I felt my work there was done, and so wandered on in search of fresh fields of usefulness. In the middle of a dark, lonely plain, I came upon a solitary hut in which I found a man lying on some wisp of dirty straw, unable to move, and to all appearance dying. He told me that in his earth life he had thus abandoned and left to die a sick comrade whom he had robbed of the gold for which they had both risked their lives, and that now he was also dead. He found himself lying in the same helpless, deserted way. Of course, that's his own conscience has come back. He created this, right? His mind, he felt so guilty. When he passed away, he ended up in the same position. He's punishing himself. I'll carry on. I asked him if he would not wish to get up and go and do something to help others and thus atone for the murder of his friend, because if so, I thought I could help him. He thought he would like to get up, certainly. He was sick of this hole, but did not see why he should work at anything or bother about other people. He'd rather look for the money he had buried and spend that. Here his cunning eyes glanced furtively at me to see what I thought of his money and if I was likely to try and find it. Now, so again, and I've been in media meetings where you think, okay, this guy knows he's dead, and yet he still wants money, and he's still tied to materialism, and he has no self-awareness whatsoever, and he still thinks someone's going to try and steal from him, even though thought is action. I mean, it's amazing, but that's what you encounter. And I'm sure, I'm not a medium, but I'm sure other mediums, that when they talk to these spirits, that's why you have to be trained as a medium, because these people will just say the darndest things, right? And they'll think the darndest things. And it's just amazing when they try to explain to them the spirit world, try to raise up to the light, try to help. Here, Franchezzo says, start helping other people. When you start helping other people, get your attitude adjusted, right? You start getting your mind off bad things. All that is good for you on earth, of course, too. So, I'll carry on. Franchezzo said, I suggested to him out rather to think of trying to find the friend he had murdered and make reparation to him, but he wouldn't hear of that, and got quite angry and said he was not sorry he had killed his friend, only sorry he was here. He thought I would have helped him to get away. I tried to talk to this man and make him see how he really might better his position and undo the wrong he had done, but it was no use. His only idea was that once given the use of his limbs again, he could go and rob or kill someone else. So at last I left him where he lay, and as I went, his feeble hand picked up a stone and flung it after me. So I mean, here is what, I asked mentally, will become of this man? And so then, this is the human condition. Now we wonder, people will say, oh, how can there be a God? This earth is cruel and chaotic, and there's all this injustice in the world. Well, that's because we have all people like this guy who come and live lives, and they're still trying to work out their primitive emotions. Someday he'll be a great person. And then a lot of us who are, could be nice in this life, uh, and yet we're still trying to learn and pay for our past wrongs from previous lives. And so things happen to us, justifiably so. But the Earth is now, as of about around the year 2000, starting to be a planet of regeneration. So that's why, and I've done a lot of YouTube videos, and on my website, my blog site, nwspiritism.com, I try and talk about that. Start preparing yourself, right? Get with the mission, become a better person. Study Spiritism, study spirituality if you want, or other religions. Just make yourself a better person. Try and start listening and filtering everything through your conscience. If you want to reincarnate on a nicer planet, then start becoming a nicer person and forgiving others. Don't go after revenge. If someone bothers you and does something to you, it's like, well, they'll learn their lesson. Bad for them. So just be that way. Okay. So he thought this mentally. He goes, what will become of this man? Then he says, I was answered. So again, this is a good clue. The Franchezzo, he thinks he's physically alone, but his thoughts are monitored all the time. So of course, he thought this, and then the answer came to his mind. Because he had just come from earth after dying a violent death, and his spirit is weak, but ere long he will grow strong, and then he'll go forth and join other marauders like himself who go about in bands and add another horror to this place. After the lapse of many years, it may even be centuries, the desire for better things will awake, and he will begin to progress, but very slowly, for the soul which had been in change so long and is so poorly developed, so degraded as in this man, often takes cycles of time to develop its dormant powers. So again, he's showing that this guy could be in for centuries. Spirits have said that people have been in the dark abyss for over 10,000 years. And a lot of that are like the leadership of what they call them, the dragon, right? And this is the leadership. These are the people that are trying to organize as well as they can organize. They're not as organized as people think they are. I mean, there's no such thing as Satan per se. There are very ignorant, I don't like to use the word evil, but bad intention spirits in the dark abyss, in purgatory, that want everybody else on earth to be like them. And they will work fervently that the earth does not become a planet of regeneration, because what happens to them when the planet becomes a planet of regeneration? The lower zone and the dark abyss disappears. You're not going to have negative, ignorant spirits around you. When you incarnate on a planet of regeneration, a full planet of regeneration, you're not going to have these spirits around you. You're going to have mature spirits. You'll communicate more with the spirit world. Those people will have to go somewhere else. Okay, so Nicholas, what's up now? Okay, this Jane had a message. Just want to make sure. Okay, after I had wandered for some time over this dreary, desolate plain, I felt so tired, weary of heart, that I sat down and began musing what I had seen in this awful sphere. Oh, let me show this question here. So, likely anybody can claim the title Satan. Yeah, and I think what you'll see is when people communicate with spirits, and good or bad, that they will say they're somebody just to use that name to give them more power. But these people who are Satan worshipers per se, they're really talking with very base, not nice spirits. And these spirits have some power, right? They can put things in people's mind. They can influence people by giving bad thoughts. So yes, they have some power, but it's sad. Then it's just, can you reconcile this with serpent seed doctrine? So I do not know what you mean with serpent seed doctrine. So you have to give me a little bit explanation of that. I'm sorry, I'm not quite familiar with that. So if you want to write that out, I'll get back to it and I'll show that on the question. Okay, so where was I? Oh, the sight of so much evil and suffering had depressed me. The awful darkness and the heavy murky clouds oppressed my soul that ever had loved the sunshine and light, as I fancy only we of the southern nations love it. And then I worried. Oh, how I worried and longed for news from her whom I left on earth. And that's his love. No word had reached me as yet from my friends, no news of my beloved. I knew not how long I'd been in this place, where there was no day to mark the time, nothing but eternal night that brooded and reigned in silence over everything. Okay. My thoughts were full of my beloved. I prayed earnestly that she might be kept safe on earth to gladden my eyes when the time of probation in this place should be over. While I prayed, I became conscious of a soft pale light suffused around me as from a glowing star that grew and grew till it expanded and opened out into the most glorious picture framed in rays of light. And in the center I saw my darling, her eyes looking into mine and smiling at me, her sweet lips parted as though speaking my name. Then she seemed to raise her hand, touching her lips with her fingertips, threw me a kiss. So shyly, so prettily was it done that I was in raptures, and rose to return that kiss to look more closely at her. And lo, the vision had vanished, and I was alone on the dark plain once more. But no longer sad. That bright vision had cheered me and given me hope and courage to go on once more and to bring others such hope as cheered myself. So again, this shows you Franchezzo was always connected. Now, so how is he always connected? Let's talk that for a second. All thoughts, even in our physical manifestation, all thoughts are recorded and your thoughts go out from your brain all throughout the spirit universe. Even in our physical cocoons, our thoughts go out. So the spirit world always knows your thoughts. And of course, his managers probably were looking at Franchezzo as he was doing this not easy task. And they were monitoring him very carefully. And he was, depressed and tired. And they kind of gave him a little help, right? Just as they give him direction, they also kind of give him a little boost. Like, you're doing a good job here. Get your spirits up, right? So our prayers are answered. In fact, in Spiritist literature by the Reverend G. Val, when I talk about that in my book, Heaven and Below, that prayers are sent up and they are then looked at, and there's at a level of heaven, and they said, okay, can we handle this? And if we don't really understand it, they'll send it somewhere else and they'll get it. So every prayer, people can look at it. Now, it could be that, no, they're not going to do that because it's not a nice prayer, like they want to hurt someone else. That's not a good thing. And they say that even prayers, when people don't think they're prayers, if you're just concentrating, you're trying to solve something, even those will try to be answered. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's go back. Okay, the serpent seed is an Old Testament literal Bible belief that Eve mated with a snake and created two bloodlines, the line of Abel, the Adamic race, and the line of Cain, the serpent seed, modern. Okay, yes. So, in fact, Spiritism says that the whole Adam and Eve is a myth. That the fact that in the Old Testament that was done to as in memory of a better planet they were from. So let me kind of go back and talk about that for a second. So in a wonderful book called On the Way to the Light, and it's by this Spirit Emmanuel, psychographed by Chico Xavier. In fact, there's a review of it on my website, nwspiritism.com. They talk about how they, Jesus and other spirits came and formed the earth and guided the earth from the, like a ball of fire for billions of years and started the human race. So at some point in time, the human race wasn't progressing as it should. So they brought people, and kind of like we are now, people who were in a planet as a planet of regeneration, but they were not becoming more civilized. They weren't becoming more loving and more spiritual. And so what they did is they brought them to the primitive planet of Earth. And so that memory of being in a planet of a good planet, planet of regeneration, became the myth of Adam and Eve. That's what Spiritism says. And of course, so our own corruption. So when in a lot of in the Bible and other places say, we were in this perfect place, and then we sinned and we went out of paradise. Well, that was a small group. I don't know how big, but it was a group of spirits that were in a nice place, and they behaved so badly in that nice place, they were sent to a worse place so they could work it out and become better again. So it's really the process that's there is you start out as a primitive spirit because you've reincarnated in subgroup of insects and animals, and then finally you graduate to be a free-willed spirit, and yet you have all these primitive emotions like kill or be killed, take what you want, right? Because that's how you survive on physical planets, and that's how you survive as a very primitive, like tribesman. Although but then you become more and more, and you advance to these more civilized sentiments, and so that's kind of the process it is. So Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, were all part of that. So though I remember that one male high spirit incarnated on Earth. Okay, so that is I think that memory is a little bit wrong. So is what I was talking about to assist in human evolution. There could be a couple of things. One is there were many spirits came from other planets to help assist in human evolution. But what I did talk about is one male and one female spirit that became high spirits that were on Earth, started as primitive spirits, and rose very, very quickly, and became in positions of high power. And they were sent to another planet to assist in evolution on that other planet, on the evolution of human-like free-willed spirits. So I think that is what you remember on that one. So again, I'm glad you asked that question, because it shows you that's the goal, right? The goal is for us to be on this planet and to modify our personalities so we can then become a productive member of spirit society, as these two, and I forgot where I had that. You can probably find it on my book. I'm sure it's in my book, one of my books. And it's probably Spirits. It's probably book 2. It's probably this book. Let me find this book. How Spirits Are Educated. There we go. It's probably this book right here. And Spirit and Spirit Universe, book 2 of Spiritism, the Spirit World Revealed to an Anglican Vicar. And that's where book 1 is Heaven and Below. I'll talk about heaven in the lower zone. And book 2 is all about spirits and how spirits rise. And so this is probably one of the ones I talked about, is how these people rose in the hierarchy in order for them, and then for them to really play an important part in the evolution of another planet. That's what is awaiting you. Really important jobs. Okay, so then again, the serpent is the sine wave material world. Yeah, I think that's a way of looking at it, is that is kind of your a good representation, because that is materialism holds us down. In fact, a lot of people will go down into the lower zone because they're still tied to material goods. They may be nice people, but In fact, Andre Louise's father, grandfather, I should say, who he loved a lot, he found him down in his lower zone looking for gold because he was like a miser. Now, Andre Louise never noticed that as a kid, right? Because who knows what you notice as a kid? But he was he was severe in his business dealing, but he wasn't an evil person. But he was just so tied to the material world. So I think that is uh, an excellent analogy and way to look at it. Okay, let me carry on. So I love these questions. Okay, I rose and went out again. This is after he was kind of propped up and given that vision, and in a short time was overtaken by a number of dark and most repulsive-looking spirits. They wore ragged black cloaks and seemed to have their faces concealed by black masks like spectral highwaymen. They did not see me, and I had found that as a rule the dwellers of the sphere were too low in intelligence and spiritual sight to be able to see anyone from the spheres above unless brought into direct contact with them. Curious to see what they were about, I drew back and followed them at a little distance. Presently, another party of dark spirits approached, carrying what looked like bags with some sort of treasure. Immediately, they were attacked by the first comers. They had no weapons in their hands, but they fought like wild beasts with teeth and claws, their fingernails being like the claws of a wild animal or a vulture. They fashed upon each other's throats and tore them. They scratched and bit like tigers or wolves, till one half at least were left lying helpless upon the ground, while the rest rushed off with the treasure, which to me seemed only lumps of hard stone. Again, so let's talk about that for a second. First, they can't kill themselves. They can only think. If they believe that someone is clawing at their throat and hurting them, then they feel hurt and they feel like, they can't do anything. Then they give up. And eventually they'll get back up and they'll all be whole again. They can't die. And they'll think the lumps of stone is gold, but it's not. I'll carry on. When all who were able to move had gone, I drew near the poor spirit lying moaning on the ground to see if I could help any of them. But it seemed to be no use doing so. They only tried to turn upon me and tear me in pieces. They were more like savage beasts than men. Even their bodies were bent like beasts. The arms were long like an ape's, the hands hard, and the fingers and nails like claws, and they half walked and half crawled on all fours. Their faces could scarcely be called human, the very features that become bestial, while they lay snarling and showing their teeth like wolves. I thought of the strange wild tales I had read of men changing into animals, and I felt I could almost believe that these were such creatures. In their horrible, glaring eyes were an expression of calculation and cunning which was certainly human, and the motions of their hands were not like those of an animal. Moreover, they had speech and were mingling their howls and groans with oaths and curses and foul language unknown to animals. Are there souls even here? I asked. Again came the answer. Yes, even here. Lost, degraded, dragged down, and smothered, till almost all trace is lost. Yet even here are the germs of souls. These men were pirates of the Spanish Main, highwaymen, freebooters, slave dealers, and kidnappers of men. They have been so brutalized themselves that almost all trace of the human is merged in the wild animal. Their instincts were those of savage beasts. Now they live like beasts and fight like them. So we have a question. It says, I don't know why some people say Earth is hell. And it's amazing. A lot of people say that. And to a lot of people, let's be fair. I mean, I've known women that says I'm in pain all the time, or another person said I've been, betrayed by all my friends and my significant others. And to them, it is, because look, it's like you only know what is relative to yourself. So if they'd been in actually seeing what Franchezzo had seen, and seeing these people try to rip each other apart, they wouldn't say that Earth is hell. But Earth can be a very unpleasant place. It is chaotic because we live on a planet of atonement, but it is chaotic and unpleasant because of karma, because if that's what they did before, and they're trying to the spirit world is trying to help them grow out of that so they don't do that again. And of course, it says we make our own hell. Exactly. We are the cause. It's cause and effect. Karma is real. And if everyone believed that karma is real, we wouldn't have corrupt politicians. We wouldn't have people robbing other people. We wouldn't have any of that if they knew. Instead, society just wants us to concentrate on materialism and to please ourselves at any cost. And that's why we really need to kind of hold that back, not look at the news, ignore most of whatever's out there, because most of it's not very good, and educate ourselves and know that we are immortal, we have a conscience, we are someday going to be pure spirits. So yes, it's very true. Okay. And then he said, and for them is there still hope? Can anyone help them, I ask. Even for these there is hope, though many will not avail themselves of it for ages yet to come. Yet here there are others who even now can be helped. I turned, and at my feet lay a man who had dragged himself to me with great difficulty and was now too exhausted for further effort. He was less horrible to look upon than the others. And that's a clue, right? Because you look as you are, right? In the spirit world, you are on the outside what you are on the inside. Whether we're in the physical world, you could be this beautiful person, but then when you leave your body at night to go wander to the spirit world, you're this horrible beast. You can't see that. In fact, the spirits talk about that. This beautiful woman went to sleep, and this old witch, hag looking, came out because she was that in her character. He was less horrible to look upon than the others, and in his distorted face are yet traces of better things. I bent over him and heard. Oh, I went too far. Sorry. I bent over him and heard his lips murmur, "Water, water, for any sake. Give me water, for I am consumed with a living fire." I had no water to give him, and knew not where to get any in this land, but I gave him a few drops of essence I had brought from the land of dawn for myself. The effect upon him was like magic. It was an elixir. He sat up and stared at me and said, "You must be a magician. That hath cooled me, put out the fire that had burned within me for years. I have been filled with a living fire of thirst ever since I came to this hell." I now drawn him away from the others and began to make passes over his body. Now, passes is when people pass their hands. They don't touch you, but they pass their hands. In fact, I've given passes, and you can feel the electricity go through your arms to the other person. And the way the pass works is a spirit behind you in the physical world, using universal energy and using you to transform that universal fluid, I should say, to the fluid that will help that person that you're giving passes to. And as I did so, his suffering ceased, and he grew quiet and restful. I was standing by him and wondering what to do next, whether to speak or to go away and leave him to himself, when he caught my hand and kissed it passionately. "Oh, friend, how I am to thank you! What shall I call you who have come to give me relief after all these years of suffering?" Then he said, "If you are thus grateful to me, would you not wish to earn the gratitude of others by helping them? So shall I show you how you could?" "Yes, oh yes, most gladly, for only if you'll take me with you, good friend." "Well then, let me help you up, and if you're able, we had better leave this spot as soon as we can," said I, and together we set forth to see what we could do. My companion told me he had been a pirate and in the slave trade. He had been a mate of a ship and was killed in a fight, and had awakened to find himself and others of the crew in this dark place. How long he had been there, he had no idea, but it seemed like an eternity. He and other spirits like him went about in bands and were always fighting. When they did not meet another party to fight, they fought amongst themselves. The thirst for fighting was the only excitement they could get in this horrible place, where there was never any drink to be got which could quench the awful burning thirst, which consumed them all. And what they drank only made them seem 1,000 times worse. It was like pouring living fire down their throats. Then he said, "You could never die, no matter what you suffered. That was the awful curse of the thing. You had got beyond death. There's no use trying to kill yourself or get others to kill you. There is no such escape from suffering. Well, yeah, you're immortal. We are like a lot of hungry wolves, he said. For want of anyone to attack us, we used to fall upon each other and fight till we were exhausted, and then we would lie moaning and suffering till we recovered enough to go forth again and attack someone else. I've been longing for any means of escape. I almost got to praying for it at last. I felt I would do anything if God would only forgive me and let me have another chance. Okay, this is the clue. He finally changed his attitude, said, I don't like this anymore. I want to escape. Please, God, help me. That's all they're waiting for these people to do. Then help will come. Franchezzo was sent to this person to help him. And when I saw you standing near me, I thought perhaps you were an angel sent down to me after all. Only you've got no wings nor anything of that sort, as they paint them in the pictures. But then pictures don't give you much idea of this place. And if they're wrong about one place, why not about the other? Then Franchezzo said, I laughed at him, and yes, even that place of sorrow I laughed. My heart felt so much lightened to find myself of so much use. Imagine how you would feel helping this guy out of this terrible thing, right? You just feel so good about yourself. This is what's waiting for you in heaven, is to help people like that. If that's what you want to do. There's lots of jobs in heaven, but you're not going to have to do what you don't want to do. And then I told him who I was and how I came to be there. And he said if I wanted to help people, there were some dismal swamps there where a great many unhappy spirits were imprisoned. And he could take me to them and help a bit himself, he thought. He seemed afraid to let me go out of his sight, lest I should disappear and leave him alone again. I felt quite attracted to this man because he seemed so very grateful, and I was also glad of companionship of any sort, except that of those most repulsive beings who seemed the majority of the dwellers here. For I felt lonely and somewhat desolate in this far-off, dismal country. The intense darkness, the horrible atmosphere of the thick fog, made it almost impossible to see far in any direction, so that when we reached the land of swamps before I was aware of it, except for feeling a cold, damp, offensive air which blew in our faces. Then I saw looming before me a great sea of liquid mud, black, fetid, and stagnant, a thick slime of oily blackness floating on the top. Here and there, monstrous reptiles with huge inflated bodies and projecting eyes were wallowing. Great bats with almost human faces like vampires hovered over it, while black and gray smoke, wreathed of noisome vapors, rose from its decaying surface and hung over it in weird, fantastic phantom shapes that shifted and changed ever and anon in the fresh forms of ugliness. These are all these thoughts, right? All of these thoughts are creating this environment, all this negative energy. Think of the opposite. Think of heaven, how all this positive energy is making it so nice and wonderful. Now, waving aloft wild arms and shaking, nodding, gibbering heads, which seemed almost endowed with sense and speech, then melting into the mist again to form into some new creature of repulsive horror. On the shores of this great foul sea were innumerable crawling, slimy creatures of hideous shape and gigantic size that lay sprawling on their backs, or plunged into that horrid sea. I shuddered as I looked upon it, and was about to ask if there could indeed be lost souls struggling in that filthy slime, when my ears heard a chorus of wailing cries and calls for help coming from the darkness before me, and that touched my heart with their mournful hopelessness, and my eyes, growing more accustomed to the mist, distinguished here and there struggling human forms wading up to their armpits in the mud. I called them and told them to try and walk towards me, for I was on the shore, but they could either not see nor could not hear me, for they took no notice, and my companion said he believed they were both deaf and blind to everything but their immediate surrounding. He had been in the sea of foul mud himself for a time, but he managed to struggle out, though he understood that most were unable to do so without help from another, and that some went on stumbling about it and for years. Again, we heard those pitiful cries, and one sounded so near us I thought of plunging myself in and trying to drag the wretched spirit out. But, it was too horrible, too disgusting. I recoiled in horror at the thought, and then again that despairing cry smote upon my ears and made me feel I must venture it. So in I went, trying my best to stifle my sense of disgust, and guided by the cry soon reached the man, the great phantoms of the mist, wavering and swooping and rushing overhead as I did so. He was up to his neck in the mud and seemed sinking lower when I found him, and it seemed impossible for me alone to draw him out. So I called to the pirate spirit to come and help me, but he was nowhere to be seen. Thinking he'd only led me to a trap and deserted me, I was about to turn and struggle out when the unfortunate spirit besought me so pitifully not to abandon him that I made another great effort and succeeded in dragging him a few yards, and then drawing his feet out of a trap of weeds at the bottom, which they appeared to be caught. Then somehow I half supported him till we reached the shore, where the unfortunate spirit sank down in unconsciousness. I was a good deal exhausted also, and sat down beside him to rest. I looked round for my pirate friend and beheld him wallowing about in the sea at some distance, and evidently bringing out someone along with him. Even in the midst of my awful surroundings, I could not help feeling a certain sense of amusement in looking at him. He made such frantic and exaggerated efforts to haul along the unlucky spirit, and was still shouting and going on, that it was calculated to alarm anyone who was timid. I did not wonder to hear the poor spirit almost imploring not to be so energetic, to take it a little slower, and to give him some time to follow. I went over to them, and the poor rescued one now being near the shore, I helped to get him out and to let him rest beside the other one. So I'm going to leave it here, because this is a long chapter. So this will go, the next part of part 3 of chapter 21 will be on next Tuesday. So if you're, so, you know, I don't want to have be talking about the lower zone and you know how terrible it is, not to give you some idea of the wonderfulness of heaven, which is beautiful. So that's why I really would recommend people reading about Spiritism, going to my blog, reading what I say about that. And a good way to understand heaven is Heaven and Below, Book 1 of Spiritism, the Spirit World Revealed to an Anglican Vicar. And then I talk about the heaven, the lower zone, Jesus in there. And then the second book in the series is, let me find it here. Oh, well, it took a while. Let me hold on a second. Wait, but this. So, yeah, so this chapter is good. It just, you read these writings, and this is on PDF, right? So that's why I love, people send me these things, and I love reading them because they're just so good. Okay, here's the second book, Spirits and the Spirit Universe. So this I talk about, and what I do. So I'm not a medium. I don't talk directly to spirits, but what I do is I read everything I can in English, coming from Spiritist mediums and other books, and I don't use other books that are not Spiritist writings to say anything, except maybe I might comment about them, to tell you. And this is what the great thing about Spiritism does. It gives you so much more information. And this is why I'm talking about what is really there or what's not there, and that it tells you about the processes and the procedures of the spirit world. It's like you want to go and you want to apply for a job at a company, but you really want to know, okay, what are the divisions? Who's important? What do they do? Do people like working for them? Do people hate working for them? Who are the good bosses? Who are the bad bosses? Kind of how the whole thing works. Of course, you never find out everything. There's always little details. And this is what Spiritism is. This is what Spiritism is. It gives us the details of really our whole universe, of the spirit universe and the physical universe, which is a subset of the spirit universe. And so in the second book, I really say, what is the spirit? Because you are spirits. We are spirits. And we have been alive for who knows how long, and we're immortal and we'll go on for eternity. And yet it tells you how you rise as a spirit. There's not just one heaven. There's levels of heaven. And there's different, people will say there's different numbers of levels. But the main thing is, as you rise in level, in spirituality, you rise in level and you become less matter and more energy. Your ratio of matter to energy, right, goes down. And so for someone like Jesus, who is almost, I believe he's pure energy. Could be a little bit wrong about that. Don't know for sure. But whereas we are still struggling to become less dense all the time, we go higher and higher and higher. And in fact, that's why people think they see angels, because when people in NDEs or visions, they'll see this bright, fuzzy thing, and it looks like they've got wings, right? And they can barely see their face. Well, that's because they're higher and they're more energy than matter, and the love of God is reflecting from them. And so you just see this kind of more this fuzzy outline. If you were on the same level as the spirit visiting you that you thought were an angel, it would look normal to you. But that's the difference. Anyway, so the Spirit and Spirit Universe is my second book. And then my third book is How We Are Guided by Spirits, which tells each individually how we're guided by spirits, and all, countries, cultures, and races are guided by spirits too, and how the future is going to be. So that will give you a good introduction and a good survey, but kind of like maybe the first book you should read to more give you the basic tenets and feel for Spiritism is Spiritism 101, the Third Revelation. Now that is in PDF for free on my site, and if you want, you can get it on Kindle, Audible, or paperback. It's like less than 100 pages. So you can get that, but you can get it for free. And then also I have the Spirits book, which I think everyone should read. Some people just, I love it. I absorbed it. This is codified by Allan Kardec in the 1850s. This is what started Spiritism. This is the Third Revelation. And it was all organized by the Spirit of Truth under the guise of Jesus Christ to give them answers to 1,019 questions. What is spirit like? And they said that we're given more information as the human race is ready, culturally and technologically ready for more revelations about the spirit world. And that the Old and New Testament, those passages which are full of love, fraternity, and charity are eternal. But the other passages, what we read about and think that maybe it's not so nice in our current culture, were there because of the cultural level and technology of the time by those people. So, and then what I do is really to explain the spirit universe itself. And if you want to get like a whole survey of everything, I suggest this is the book you should read. It's The Spirit Realm. Spiritism is Real, the Reality of Our Existence. I go into detail of what the spirit universe is, what the physical universe, how we are a subset, and how you can look at it as geometric shapes, or you can look at it as a logical complex, right? Or you can look at it in a database sort of way that we are really all spirits are more logical constructs, and yet we have ability to think of ourselves of having a spirit body, which we call the paraspirit. And then when we go into this kind of, we could call it on Earth, into the simulation, which is kind of a simulation within a simulation, but you go into this Earth and you're put into this simulation that you're a physical body, which is an objective world, meaning thoughts don't determine what we want, whereas thoughts is action in the spirit world. And you can look at that. There's ways, and I try and kind of present this in different manners. And I hope this would help people so they can see the immense power you have when you're in the spirit world, and you get more and more power to do good as you become a better person. Because who's going to let someone have the power of thought who is a retrograde, right? It's not a nice person. That's not going to happen. So you have to earn that. So anyway, I'm going to end there. I want to thank everybody. I love everyone's questions, and I want to thank everyone. And please share this video and give me more comments on what you want to talk about. And I will see you Sunday live stream. And of course, I'll